Sometimes things happen in the galaxy that defy explanation. In the past, they would be chalked down to magic or divine intervention, and in many ways, that still holds true today. The unpredictable nature of the warp and the fickle whims of the Chaos Gods means that many things are because of them or the other deities in the galaxy, but some still are beyond any true understanding. It is one of these phenomena that we shall discuss today, a group of enigmatic Astartes that have appeared to save the Imperium on countless battlefields. No one truly knows who they are or where they came from, but their arrival is almost always a harbinger of a turning tide and a victory snatched from the jaws of defeat. They have been more active than ever in recent times, yet they remain a subject of intense debate and frustration for those who know of them. Clad in their flame-wreathed and bone-adorned armour, they are known simply as the Legion of the Damned. This is Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. The origins of the beings known as the Legion of the Damned is a subject of rampant speculation or whispered wonderings from the Adeptus Astartes, historians, and the Inquisition alike. Some give them a more physical origin story, whilst other tales are somewhat more ethereal or otherwise unnatural in nature. The more physical theory relates to the lost Space Marine chapter known as the Firehawks, founded in M36 but ultimately lost in the warp in 963 and 41. The Firehawks were ultimately declared destroyed 20 years later, but some believe that rather than simply dying in the Immaterium, they underwent a shocking transformation that changed them into what we would know today as the Damned Legionnaires. A few years after their official declaration of destruction, remnants of the lost Firehawks began to reappear. Coffins from one of their ships, occupants wearing unconventional armour and unable to be identified, a vessel resembling their flagship appearing to destroy a Chaos fleet. Most tellingly, though, was the salvation of an Imperial research station, with the mysterious Space Marines leaving the chapter banner behind with the words Indedicato Imperatum Ultra Articulo Mortis inscribed upon it, for the Emperor beyond the point of death. Also, if I butcher the pronunciation, I do apologise. This makes it pretty clear that even if the Firehawks aren't the Legion of the Damned, something is going on with them. And even if the Legion weren't the Firehawks, it's certainly possible that they could be another Space Marine chapter lost and twisted by the Immaterium. However, that's not the only possibility, even if by the logic of the universe it might well be the most likely. It is of course possible that the Legion are ghosts, the spirits of dead Astartes whose hatred of the Imperium's foes goes beyond mortality itself. It is said that the faces of the damned legionnaires are pallid with hollow eyes. This is not necessarily a spiritual indicator, those features can be associated with the gene seeds of some Primarchs, but it is worth noting nonetheless. It would also explain the Legion's modus operandi, but we'll get to that later. Suffice it to say that being ghosts would explain how they get to where they get to so easily, and nobody seems to know how and why. After ghosts and mutated Astartes, well, things get a little more difficult to explain and some really wild speculations start being made. A theory shared by both the scholars of the Imperium and by Astartes librarians, though in a slightly different form, states that the Legion are a result of the Space Marine's own psyche. The scholarly theorem suggests that they are a manifestation of scars brought on by the horrors witnessed by the Legiones Astartes, scars so deep as to permeate through the entirety of their successors for all of time. This burning hatred can then be channeled by librarians, though seemingly unknowingly, and manifested as the Legion of the Damned. The librarians see it differently, as I think they'd know if they were creating the Legion themselves. They believe the Legion are a mass hallucination of humanity given form. They take the form of Space Marines, which are seen as a symbol of both hope and destruction of the Imperium's foes, and in extremely stressful situations, the latent psychic power of humanity can be tapped into to summon the Legion to deliver them. It's unclear whether this is true, because the Legion don't seem to care about the number of people present when they make their entrance. But given every human is somewhat psychic, it's definitely possible, especially if actual full-blown psychers who you'd think would know the most about this sort of thing believe it to be the situation. However, There is one more theorem about the origins of the Legion of the Damned, but to justify it, there is a huge assumption that you need to make, so run with me. Said assumption is thus: the Emperor is a Chaos God or some other equivalent being within the Immaterium. I know, heresy, just keep going with me for a second. There is evidence to suggest this, though I won't detail it in this particular log, but if you believe it to be true, there's quite a logical conclusion we can reach. The Legion of the Damned are demons of the Emperor, or equivalents to them anyway. The Inquisitor Kixos described these imperial demons as angels mortis, though he was later slain by Inquisitor Eisenhorn with his work on the matter denounced as heresy, because of course it's a dangerous thing for the Imperium to think or ignore. It's not just the Inquisition who hold this thought either. An Eldari autarch described them as creatures born of the warp and demons that must be brought low. It's something to think on. Of course, there may be evidence for them being firehawks too because of their massive mutation from the warp exposure, but it's a pretty explicit answer if you choose to take it literally. It's Eldari, maybe you don't want to do that, but if you do. As for what the Legion truly are, though, I think it is best you reserve judgment until you have all the information I can give you in this log. Personally, I think they're demons, but that's just because I like the idea of the Emperor being a Chaos God, with the Living Saints and the Sanguinor all tied up in it too. But I won't go into more detail on that, I'll let you judge at the end. So, that's the origins of the Legion of the Damned, but how do these mysterious warriors operate when they make their presence known? Again, none know truly save them, but there are patterns that have been observed to allow us to guess. The Legion of the Damned do not arrive as part of the Imperial muster for a campaign, nor do they arrive often, if at all, on the eve of a battle. Instead, the appearance of the Legion is entirely unannounced and seemingly completely random, as the black-armoured Astartes will only arrive to save a world or other Imperial force from disaster and or annihilation. Quite how they do it is unknown. They just appear, seemingly from flame as they stride into battle and cut down the Imperium's foes. Their weapons and armour may appear as typical for the Adeptus Astartes, at least superficially, but bidlogs and other accounts tell tales of not so subtle differences. For one, the theory of their spectral nature is reinforced by the fact that enemy attacks will often simply pass through them. Swords, plasma beams, even volcano cannon blasts that annihilate swathes of foes around them have been recorded as not even affecting the Legion of the Damned, who can just keep on going regardless. The armour itself is also unique in many ways. It appears to absorb all light cast upon it to keep its pitch black look, and instead it smoulders and flickers with what is almost certainly psychic fire. Combine this with its adornment of bones, flame iconography, and other symbols of death, and the Legion become a terror weapon as much as anything else. After all, haunting things that look like they're dead that you just can't kill, yeah, that's pretty scary. As for their weapons, whilst their bolters appear to function just as any other, recordings have shown that they have never needed to be reloaded. These bolters seem to have infinite ammo, and the same can likely be said for their special weapons that are invariably variants on the Flamer and Melter gun. Almost. Truly, to both the astute observer and the panicked foe alike, the Legion of the Damned are an otherworldly enigma that defies all belief. It is unknown if the Damned Legionnaires are capable of speech, but there are no known records of them conversing or otherwise making a sound. I mean, it's not like they'd ever stick around to make a chat possible, and even fate itself seems determined to keep them apart from those who wish to reach them. At battle's end, the Legion, as they came, will simply vanish, returning to wherever they came from or just fading out of existence. Many Inquisitors who seek to learn of the Legion, particularly from the Ordo Chronos, or who bear witness to their appearance, will endeavour to reach them before this happens, trying to fight as close to at their side as they can, but for inexplicable reasons they can never get close before the Legionnaires disappear, much to their annoyance. Often the tides of battle will just draw them apart, or they'll be knocked out unconscious, or something will happen that feels like fate is screwing with them. Further adding to this is the nature of the Legion's vanishing act, which confounds the minds and technologies alike that witness it. After a short amount of time, those people who saw the Legion in action will begin to forget they were ever there, making testimony collection exceptionally difficult if not done either immediately or on the fly. Plus, their disappearance seems to send out a static pulse of some kind that screws up any recording machinery, traumatizing their machine spirits and leaving them almost unable to surrender any information despite Tech Priest ministration. Their appearance is just as enigmatic, as no teleport signatures are detected, and the Legion can appear even in areas that no Imperial ship or group could hope to reach due to warp storms, interference, distance, or the like. A commonly held thought is that if the Legion are connected to the warp in some way, they have an innate mastery of it that allows them to be exactly where they need to be at any given moment, even in more than one place at once if some reports are to be believed. However, there's actually a full-blown sort of scientific theory to explain this, penned by an Inquisitor Quadrimester as part of an investigation commissioned by the Senatorum Imperialis. In his work, The Tarot Symbiosis, Quadrimester hypothesizes that the Legion are cursed with a warp affliction, perhaps implying that Firehawk theorem we discussed earlier. This contagion heightens their psychic potential, allowing them to read the Emperor's tarot incredibly accurately to ensure they always arrive in the right places at the right times. However, it will also kill them and is potentially contagious, which is why they try so hard to stay away from other Imperial forces. This theorem is also used to explain the strange flames that wreath the Legion, as they seem to respond to battle. They flare as the Legion attack, and can even become so fierce as to immolate the Legionnaire and their enemy all in one fell swoop. This latter part is known officially as Pyro Mortis, but whether it's linked to anything is unclear, and it's just more wild speculation with a bit of a grounding in fragmented evidence. I'm not saying Quadrimester's right, but it would tie everything up if he was. The way a Legion of the Damned appearance goes is almost shockingly repetitive in nature, so apologies in advance if I say that if you've heard one tale of your deeds, you've kind of basically heard them all. The long and short of it is as follows. An Imperial force is on the verge of losing some critical battle, often ones when they're on the defensive, when the Legion materialise and turn the tide to save the day, before vanishing again. However, this wasn't exactly the case for the first documented sighting of the Legion, which came in very early M40 in the Pyro Cataclysm of Villadad Prime. During an invasion by Slaneshi forces known as the Flawless Host, fragmented reports came through from the Astra Militarum defenders of mysterious space marines driving the traitors back multiple times. The appearance of the Chaos Lord and his demonic allies began to swing the battle back in Chaos's favour, but in being able to kill the Legionnaires, they also damned themselves, as they entered the aforementioned Pyro Mortis state that could even burn the demons and send them back to Slanesh screaming. The Slaneshi forces withdrew soon after, and the Legion along with them. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately given the significance of their appearance, the Legion are not documented as appearing again until 343 M41 on the world of Godba. Assumedly into the galactic northeast due to the fact it was invaded by High Fleet Moloch, Godba was used for weapon testing and bristled with defences both automated and manned. The High Fleet was held for months by the tanks and guns of the planet, but it was winning the war of attrition, slowly but surely. And then the Legion came, appearing in a cordon to protect one tank squadron and effectively escorting them to save another. With super heavies freed up from death by drowning in bodies, the Legionnaires and the tankers smashed the remainder of the invasion force alongside the rest of Godba's defenders, though Moloch itself was not entirely destroyed. One undated battle in M41, in which the Legion of the Damned were undoubtedly the ultimate last-second deliverers, came on the world of Curtis Minor. This cemetery world was passed over by the warped stellar object known as the Keeler Comet, named after one of the original Imperial saints, but tailed by a blood crusade of Khorne known as the Holocaust. The Excoriators Astartes chapter stood in their way, but only with a single understrength company and a few allies, they were never going to hold back the Blood God's armies. The Excoriators were destroyed down to a single man, their captain and future chapter master, Zachariah Kirsch, before the Legion arrived. Such was the Legion's power on this occasion, the entire Holocaust was annihilated, and the Legionnaires even destroyed the Keeler Comet itself before or around the time of their departure. Perhaps the most famous incident involving the Legion, at least before the most recent stuff, was the Battle of Andraxas in 922 N41. In this incident, the Ultramarines, led by their chief librarian Tigurius, were aiding the Mechanicus in a massive war with the Orcs in order to protect a recently uncovered force staff linked directly to Malcador the Sigillite. Unfortunately for the Ultramarines, the Greenskins held them outnumbered 50-1 and surrounded them in their bastion, and even with an individual as powerful as Tigurius, well, there was no way out. At least not until the Legion arrived. With a shimmer of the air, the black-armoured legionnaires set about massacring the Orcs, doing so with such aplomb that Tigurius didn't even need to counterattack and mop up due to the broken greenskin morale. And then the Legion were gone again, their work complete and the relic secured by the Imperium, though Tigurius did at least document it, which is part of why we know so much of how the Legion work in the first place. Well, a little bit. The Legion would appear a couple more times during M41, most notably driving off the Drukhari under Lelith Hesperax to prevent the capture of Black Templar High Marshal Helbrecht. But the 13th Black Crusade and the horrors that followed it drew the Legion of the Damned to battle more and more. The first in this spate of appearances was perhaps the most unique of all Legion arrivals, in that the Legionnaires actually seemed to stick around for more than a minute after the end. This was the Battle of the Phalanx, where the Demon Prince Be'lakor and Iron Warrior Warsmith Shontu sought to turn the Imperial Fist Fortress Monastery on Terra itself. They were unsuccessful in the secondary part of this, as the Sons of Dawn were able to delay long enough to warp jump, but the corruption of the Phalanx was far more successful. Between machine curses and warp rifts, things were looking increasingly grim for the Imperial Fist, especially since only one company was basically present on the titanic vessel that even the whole chapter couldn't maintain. And yet, despite being isolated from all reinforcements and even unable to call for aid, the Legion came for the Sons of Dawn. They were able to drive off the Dark Master and co, but rather than disappear again, the Legionnaires simply did not fade out from existence as they are wont to normally do. Instead, it seems they remained on the Phalanx for a time, presumably just hanging around and being creepy in a way that only silent, flaming Space Marines can be. We assume this because the Phalanx arrived at Cadia with legionary reinforcements, implying the Damned were still on board rather than disappearing and rematerializing again as the Fists arrived. This meant that the Legion of the Damned were present for the fall of Cadia, where they had a rather interesting interaction with the Necron pylons being activated by Belisarius' call and Trazyn the Infinite. You see, as the aforementioned individuals powered up the pylons, the power of the demonic elements of Abaddon's army were weakened significantly, along with the various psychers present and even the warp itself. However, it also depowered Saint Celestine and the Damned Legionnaires, making them weaker and unable to stop the Black Legion gaining the upper hand. Raises questions, does it not? Though their power would later be reboosted with the pylon's destruction, the fall of Cadia could not be stopped even by the Legion. I mean, it is kinda hard to stop a Blackstone fortress being chucked point blank at a planet, but they did destroy the Keeler Comet, so elements like that destroying massive stellar objects, it's not beyond them. Maybe they just didn't have time. Assumedly the Legion phased out as Cadia broke, but they were not away for long, returning in the Terran Crusade as the resurrected Robert Gilliman pushed from Macragge to Terra. The Legionnaires weren't there throughout the Crusade and seemingly only appeared once, the breakout of the Imperials from the captivity of Huron Blackheart and Kairos Fateweaver. After being freed by the Fallen under Cypher, that's a whole other kettle of fish for another time, the Imperial forces made a run for the Webway portal used by their rescuers, but came under joint assault from forces of Khorne and Tzeentch. It was at this point that the Legion materialized, turning the battle and allowing Gilliman and co. to make good their escape. The Legion did not appear again in the Terran Crusade itself, but the consequences of the Gathering Storm included most notably the Cicatrix Maledicta, the formation of which led to the period known as the Noctis Aeterna, or simply the Blackness. During that time, as the Imperium plunged into a time of nightmare perhaps not seen since the Age of Strife, the Legion was exceptionally active. Over 100 worlds are reported to have been witness to Legion sightings. Most famous of all was their appearance alongside the suicide charge of the Blood Angels against High Fleet Leviathan, but they've clearly been busy elsewhere too, including Armageddon. Whether they will continue to appear more frequently or even stick around a bit like they did on the Phalanx, we will have to wait and see. But this is something of a new age for the Imperium, so it may well be so for the Legion of the Damned as well. And that's it. Pretty much all we know on the Legion of the Damned. I'm sure there are some details I missed, and I know I can't cover every sighting, but I hope you have a greater insight on these enigmatic, well, whatever they are. I asked you to withhold judgment on their nature until you had all the facts. Well, now you pretty much do, so I'll let you make up your own mind as to what they are. As mentioned, I personally subscribe to the demon theory, but there's plenty of evidence or logic to back up any other train of thought. In any event, we must now move on. Our next destination is a place already mentioned in this log. We've not named the next champion of humanity I wish to discuss, but they are very closely tied to a particular tale we told today. For now, thank you for watching Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.